Call this meeting to order, and let's do a quick roll call. Henning.
Here.
Platt. Here. Gordon.
Here.
Hinkley. Right?
Do it again.
Do it again. All right. Hear you. This meeting, special meeting of the Albany County Planning and Zoning Commission is called to order, and we'll start with a roll call. Membership. Ms. Henning.
Here.
Mr. Platt. Here. Mr. Kornick.
Here.
Hinkley is here, and Mr. Tynes' letter of resignation was accepted by the county commissioners this morning, so this is all you get. We're in full force. Just as a preliminary thing, I'm wondering how the sound is working here. Could one of you folks on the Zoom respond if you're hearing us? I just see.
Can hear you.
We can
Okay.
hear you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I'll try to speak up. And if you need somebody to repeat themselves or speak up, feel free. The sound system here is compromised by the air moving system, so it's not the ideal. Anyway, okay. Our agenda for tonight's meeting consists of two pieces: a public hearing on the proposed amendments to the Albany County zoning resolution that were posted for public comment subsequent to our November 29th special meeting. And once we've concluded the public hearing portion of that, we will consider whether or not to certify those amendments forward for consideration by the full Board of County Commissioners. Before we get into that, I'd have a few preliminary remarks to kind of set the stage, and for the record, for the benefit of those who haven't had the familiarity with this. But first, let's also make a quick round of disclosures and conflicts of interest. So is there anything anybody should know about the four of us or what we've been doing that would affect our vote on this today? Ms. Hanning, anything to declare?
Nothing to disclose.
Mr. Flood? Correct. Okay, and I would only comment that I am a practicing hydrogeologist, but since I was appointed to this position, I have declined any paying work associated with the Casper Aquifer in Albany County. Okay, let me just set the stage for a few minutes for the benefit, as I say, of the commissioners in the record. Here's a quick chronology of how we got here. And I'll go pretty quickly. We'll roll the clock back to 1999 and 2001 is where the CAP came from. And that was the first one was developed. And subsequently, the county and the city both adopted aquifer protection resolutions applied to an aquifer protection overlay zone. So you hear the term CAP, C-A-P-P, which is the Casper Aquifer Protection Plan, and the APOZ is the acronym for the Aquifer Protection Overlay Zone, which is the official footprint in which those regulations apply. 2007, city and county jointly undertook the CAP update. 2008, that was completed, and upon presentation to the county rejected the CAP that had been done by the consulting firm and started its own, along with revision of the county aquifer regs. Those new regs came to the county commissioners from planning and zoning in 2011. The regs developed by planning and zoning were rejected by the county commissioners, and they proceeded to come up with their own set without further involvement from planning and zoning. So this group has been kind of in and out of this over the years. 2019, 2020, planning and zoning took up the issue of new regs. Mostly this was fallout from the reopening of the Tumbleweed gas station, some of you may remember. Planning and zoning produced several drafts of new regulations, held public hearings, had a couple of work sessions with the Board of County Commissioners. They never really finished anything, but in February of 2021, they certified what they had done to that point forward to the board, basically handed it off to the board to take it from there. The Board of County Commissioners did take it from there, heavily modified what this group had given them, and put those drafts out for review. Took lots of public comment, discussed those at public meetings, had an official public hearing at the end as per statute. And in November of 2021, the board adopted a revised set of aquifer regulations. The next month, 2 lawsuits were filed challenging the new regs on a variety of issues, one of which was that substantive modifications were made by the county commissioners without going back to planning and zoning. So it was a fine point of the law, but the judge concluded that what the county commissioners received from planning and zoning was available as a thumbs up, thumbs down, not something that they could proceed to amend. So those regs for November 21 remained in place pending any results from the lawsuits, and so they were implemented were the rules for approximately a year until November 22, when the judge finally ruled on those lawsuits and concluded that their adoption in 2021 was contrary to state statute. So with that decision, the current regs, as we sit here today, are those originally passed in 2011. The judge also ruled that you have first to change the process for moving the boundary before you can then move the boundary. So there again, procedural sequential error, but we're here to follow the statutes as best we can, and we're certainly willing and happy to do that. In November 21, the county commissioners had changed the regs and moved the boundary at the same time. Okay, this body met on November 29th, 2022, and voted to put out for public comments an amended version of the regulations that had been adopted by the county commissioners the previous November. And then we scheduled this public hearing at that time, again, following the statutory 30-day public comment period. That brings us to where we are today. Absent substantive changes in what was distributed for comment, changes in response to public comments received over the course of the 30-day period and presented at this hearing, this body could either certify the posted amendments to the board, at which point they would start their own review process, including further comment and public hearing. That would take a minimum of 45 days at their end. Alternatively, we could decide to further amend the regs, take them back to planning and zoning, bring different regs forward at a later date. Okay, one more thing to be aware of. The county and the city have been jointly preparing a major update of the CAP over the last 9 months. The final draft from the consultants is currently expected at the end of this month, and that draft will come to planning and zoning for consideration sometime in February. We will modify or not, we can best put out the public comment and hearing, and it goes to the county commission for their process. So a final adoption no earlier than April, May, who knows how long that will drag on. So that isn't in play at this meeting, but just by way of background. And following adoption of that updated CAP, this body will start work on updating regulations. So we expect most of those amendments will be drawn from the new CAP, but everything will still have to go through the full process with planning and zoning and the county commission before those new regs are in place. So 2 final points. The regulations the board adopted in 2021 were the result of 3 years of massaging and public input. They're not perfect, nothing ever is, but they were adopted by the county as a credible reflection of the community's desires and priorities as expressed through their elected representatives. There's every reason to believe that what they found acceptable 13 months ago, they will find acceptable now. That said, we are under no obligation to accept those regs just because the board did in 2021. We can do whatever we want with them. And we have already made a few changes to what they did then. Specifically, we altered the method for changing the western boundary. We have declined to change the western boundary, so that was a major point of contention a year ago. And as per the judge's ruling, we will put off any adjustments to the boundary until a later meeting. And then one of the most controversial pieces at the November 2021 was the requirements for septics within the APOC upon replacement or construction of a new septic system. We declined to bring that amendment forward at this time, but I would point out that the DEQ regulations on which that was based had not changed since 2018 when those were passed. Okay, questions, comments from the commissioners or staff? Have I represented that correctly? Would anybody want to correct any of that, or are there questions? how we got here. Okay, seeing none, let us open the public hearing portion of the meeting. The question at hand is simply this: should we or should we not certify these amendments to the county commissioners? Anyone wishing to speak to that issue is welcome to do so. If so, please state your name and address. We'll give everyone 3 minutes. Please address the commission rather than the audience. Tell us why we should or should not certify these amendments forward to the county commissioners. I would note that we received a short set of written comments from the Albany County Clean Water Advocates today. And question for our staff: have there been any other written comments provided over the 30 days? And I don't know if you pick up the shaking of heads, but I can see double nods of no from staff. Okay, so we all know where we are. So we're open to public comment. Would anybody like to speak to the action before the commission this evening?
I would like refer to speak last. There's others who'd like to go before.
I don't know that we have an order. Is there anybody? We have one person in residence that would like to speak, but she's deferring to those on Zoom. So would any of you Zoomers like to address on this topic? Mr. Greller is raising his hand. Please go right ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity for Albany County Clean Water Advocates to speak to this regulation. As I understand it, and from your review, the regulation before you was substantially the same as that which passed the county commissioners in November of 21. We supported those regulations then. We support them today. I'd note that among the 2 major changes, we're sorry to see that the adjustment to the western boundary cannot be addressed at this time, but understand the court's mandate and look forward to the day when we can address those. We also note that in the review process of the Planning and Zoning Commission, in section 10, dealing with on-site water treatment management systems, the reference to the DEQ regulations was dropped. Certainly, the state regulations do not require the county's validation, and the state regulations apply to the work done by residents of the county. But we do believe by reinserting the language that had originally been there as the last half of the first sentence in that section 10, the document becomes both clearer and more complete. It gives people one-stop shopping as to where they would be able, and lets them know what the expectations and requirements are. While not strictly a part of the regulations, we would encourage the commissioners to supplement their conveyance to the county commissioners with material that helps better explain in detail the pollution risk that is faced in the APOZ, and we'd offered some suggested documents in our written submission. Indeed, please understand our support for this effort, and that we look forward to seeing this move to the next stage. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you very much. Duly noted. Are there others on our Zoom? Ms. Sindelar, are you wanting to make a comment? No, no is an acceptable answer.
I'm thankful Mr. Greller is able to state most of his stuff. I think this is a very good opportunity for us to protect our water, but that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. We hope that we can follow that mandate. Okay, somebody hiding behind the podium there. All right, I don't see another hand raised on the Zoom screen. Ms. Palmer, would you like to address us?
I've been called Miss Mama for a long time. So I prepared something that may be longer than 3 minutes, so just give me a Heinstein when I should, but I did bring written copies. So yeah,
And bear in mind that we have quite a specific.
the question
action
is,
that
yes,
we-
of
that we
course,
want.
recertify them, yes.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
yeah, but I come to this from having been concerned for years and noting what the city has done to awaken people to the water problems. One was we used to pay on the gutters, drains the river. And another point, hospice was advised to stop dumping drugs down into the toilets to dispose of them after a person was deceased to protect our clean water. So now the police collects those. And the third thing was, I think, much better known by the public when a man named Mr. Million wanted to divert Wyoming water to Colorado. So I won't speak to those, but I want to speak to why I think your work is extraordinarily important in protecting the aquifer. And I guessing from the folks that I've talked to, regardless of party, regardless of age, we really don't know what the aquifer is and the dangers from here. So I quote in my comments to you all, geologists that I've worked with for several years, Dr. Ron Frost, who's done international in Siberia and Australia. But he is the one that has said to me, okay, these are some things that you cannot mitigate once they're in the aquifer. Benzene is the worst. The other two are uranium and lead. You said the process for mitigation of an aquifer is extraordinarily expensive. And so even with my layperson's knowledge, I would say, no, we can't impose that on the water that we're drinking because it's so hard to clean up, as you know. Okay, it's extraordinarily expensive. So over the last, since 2012, certainly, I've been tracking the increasing droughts that are seasonal. But in 2012, there's a huge article about sewage water. And if you look at all the streets that run up and down Silver Springs, they're named after springs, like Hope Springs. And all those springs have dried up. So if there's some way I can put a street besides my own sense of urgency, I want an aquifer left for my children, my grandson, because that is half of the income. And once it gets polluted, simply cannot mitigate some of the problems. Would you like to hear more?
The floor is yours.
Well,
If you have
what
something that you.
puzzles me is why people don't notice. In spite of the education before that one time, the Laramie Rivers Conservation District did major education on what happens. I don't see the diagrams now, but I think there's things that if we open our eyes, we can see. One is that if you look off the bridge off of 3rd Street, you can see all the trash that's accumulated in Spring Creek, which begins with Clearwater Springs. Like, what are we doing? We don't even notice that because the water flows into them in the river, but then we're trying to have clean water. Another thing, I think people may noticing, but they may be mad at you about it, but it's like when we pay high water bills, some of that is because we've lost so many sources of clean water. We have to keep conserving. So in short, we cannot ignore, oh, my address is 715 South 11th. And I've been walking the Tuckton Pond every day since about 2000. But then I see the quality of water there, and something's bubble up. I think we want We cannot ignore the need for water from our aquifers, equally significant need for your help to protect. 20 years from now, our grandson can still call this gracious city on the iTunes.
Thank you. Well said. Are there others who wish to offer public comment on the proposed amendments to the zoning regulation? Hearing, seeing none, I invite a motion to close the public hearing. I so move. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Motion's been Platt, second by Hanning to close the public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Done. Thank you. Right, to give some structure to our consideration as we move forward, since the issue today is well circumscribed, I suggest that we start with a motion to certify to the board the zoning resolution, APOC amendments, as were distributed for public comment. We can then approve or amend or defeat that motion. That sounds reasonable. May I have such a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve amendment CA-02-22. Certified to the Board of County Commissioners.
Thank you. Is there a second? I second. Good moved and seconded that we proceed to certify these amendments to the board. Discussion of that motion.
I have several questions.
Proceed.
I noted that there are revisions made in 4 different colors. And I'm just curious who made the revisions and if they correspond color by color to any different person.
Okay. A polychrome question. I think this came out of our November meeting, but I'll defer to Mr. Ayers to walk you through the specifics.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Platt. Due to, I suppose, the track changes feature of Microsoft Word, it is not necessarily tied to a distinct author. It can be tied to what it is. So for example, I guess when you see green text or green strike throughs, that means it's a move. And then I guess the difference between the blue and the red is not necessarily indicative of the author of those changes. I could make changes in one in a document, save it, close it out, come back in, and sometimes my color, maybe a new color if I'm making those changes, depending on how I have it set. Or depending on how, I guess, you arrange the colors in that feature, it could be a different author altogether. So it's without, I guess, looking through the exact versions in detail, it's hard to say. Yeah, that's enough next. Then who was involved in the changes? It was, I think a collaboration of Mr. Gerch, myself, and Chair Hinckley brought this forward. Okay, thank you.
Further questions?
Looking at this comment, if we decided to make the requested change, would that be a substantive change? We would have to have an entire new hearing room.
Again, defer to Mr. Ayers.
After giving this a good degree of thought this afternoon, I think that it would fall under essentially what was noticed, which were amendments to the APAC regulations. However, that language, because of the ruling from the court, was never effectively in the APAC amendments. Therefore, it was truly never part of this proposal that is in front of you right So it would be coming out of somewhere completely new. And for that reason, it would be my opinion that it would be a substantive. Because there was no language that would apprise members, because this draft itself is slightly misleading. It showed the changes from what was being recommended initially to what I suppose is coming before us now. And that language was never actually in the resolution. So it does not really show where that came from.
So just to make that clear, the red line that was distributed for public comment was a markup of what we might call the 2011 regulations.
Correct.
So there have been amendments, things that didn't ever happen. But what we have before us today is an amendment to the post judge's ruling current regulations. Correctly, I say that.
Yes.
Okay. So all this other, as I think said, are additional amendments. Whether they were ever approved inappropriately or not is irrelevant. The question would be, are we going to make those as amendments to the zoning resolution as it stands today?
Correct. I suppose what does matter is whether, because this version shows that language is not being considered. And I believe that it would be a different story if that language was already in the APOZ regulations. However, in this instance, it was not. And I think because of those two infirmities, that would arise to the level of a substantive.
I would like to know if you this question, expediency versus not really having full experience.
I think that when we took it out at our last meeting, it was because Mr. Gertz had mentioned some difficulty in implementing it in confusion. And to me, I'm willing to put this in to the next batch of changes that we consider in light of the cap update, and that could be the place to make sure that any regulatory changes are implementable by the planning staff. So I'm comfortable putting it into the back burner, or parking it in the garage. That's one of our favorite analogies.
If you agree with her.
Yeah, and as I tried to at least allude to in my prefatory remarks, what this says is you will follow DEQ regs. It isn't necessary for us to say to someone you follow DEQ regs. Now, it's perhaps helpful, as Mr. Greller said, to one-stop shop. But these particular DEQ regs are problematic for any employees. As we saw during the year, we attempted to implement this. So I don't mean to say we should just kick our progress down the road, but what Commissioner Henning alluded to, I completely agree with. We are in the process on our other track of bringing forward amendments that will do a far better job of this than this language does.
In that case, my view is I'm prepared to approve, certify.
Okay, thank you. Other comments, questions, suggestions from the commission?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
this may be a question for Mr. Ayers. In terms of building out the record that the decision is based on, is it important to add the citations to the studies that one can already find on the Albany County webpage? Or if we want it to be explicitly considered, would would we need to read into the record the titles of some of the resources that are available?
I think, in terms of building as comprehensive of a record as possible, it would be a generally good idea to just make a citation to the general authorities which support these changes. Yeah, to a certain extent, this is inextricably tied to what happened in November of 2021. And I think if there were to be a challenge to these, all of that would come forward with it. But I think for the purposes of the second take, it would be prudent to do so.
And then procedurally, does that need to be part of the motion, or is that simply part of the record that we're laying down through this discussion?
Yeah, so at this point, this is we have moved into the consideration portion. Yeah, so that is definitely an opportunity for the commissioners to put forth their views on the matter.
It doesn't change the motion on the floor, but let us why we think these amendments are appropriate to move forward.
Yes.
Fine, I take it. Go for it.
Then I would move to include in the decision-making record the following separate reports. One, the report on spring 2010 nitrate nitrogen monitoring in the Casper Aquifer Protection Area in the city of Laramie, Wyoming, 2010. Second, the report on the summer fall 2009 nitrate nitrogen monitoring in the Casper Aquifer Protection Area, city of Laramie, Wyoming, 2010. Third, the 2015 Laramie Master Plan, Level 1, including technical memoranda, the Wyoming Water Development Commission, 2015. Fourth, septic system impact analysis performed for Albany County, Wyoming by Wenk Associates Incorporated, May 2019. And lastly, the Casper Aquifer Nitrate Loading Study, Laramie, Wyoming, also Wenk Associates Incorporated, October 2020.
Second. Yeah, I guess you made that as a motion, but okay, so there was a second. Let me offer a friendly amendment. The 2011 Casper Protection Plan. Major piece behind this, for example, the White Zone. You could accept that.
I accept you.
Hold a second. Now let's follow that thread. Are there other specific documents that anyone would like to refer to by way of supporting their decision to? So we can make amendments to this motion. And let us understand that that's not the universe of possibilities. We've all had conversations about this, many of us followed the discussions over the years. So this is not in any way intended to be an exhaustive list, but rather, if I characterize them correctly, key documents that we feel are important to our decisions.
At this point, it really isn't appropriate to include the draft updated cap.
That is in draft, that hasn't been accepted by either this body or the convention. So I suggest.
Should we declare the wastewater feasibility study?
Okay, so we have just a friendly amendment.
Yeah.
Let's state it coherently, but Mr. Cornick would include the East Laramie wastewater feasibility study as presented to Laramie County Environmental Advisory Committee to 2010. This is a slide set that explains the effects of the Laramie study.
I accept the amendment.
Okay. Council would like to And, this document. Okay. Try to rewind the motion before us as need to include this list in our forwarding to the planning. Roll call for that. Amendment to the motion that we started. Okay, Ms. Henning,
Aye.
Mr. Platt. Aye. Mr. Burnham. Weekly votes aye. Okay, so now we have the motion to certify forward to the planning commission. Further discussion of that motion. And if there are comments, we could make room for them. Seeing, hearing done. Let's put the motion to a vote. The motion is to move this forward to the county commission. Ms. Hanning.
Aye.
Mr. Platt. Aye. Mr. Gordon. Hinckley, aye. It's unanimous. Thank you for your good efforts. I will accept, we look at staff here. Is there anything else we need to take up before we adjourn? Mr. Garch.
So, Mr. Chair, sorry, we were, couldn't hear what you just did. I think you added a study, correct?
Yes,
And did you reference the Castle Protection Plan of 2000?
yes, we did.
That's, I don't have anything else, I just wanted to make sure.
Okay, so let's be
And
clear.
I'll write down and look at the study for you.
Okay, very good. Record should be clear on what it is that we have done. All right. We're just looking to a vote on the motion that brought us here tonight. Ms. Hannon. Aye. Mr. Platt. Aye. Mr. Burnham. Hinckley. Aye. So we're done. May have done that twice, but it never hurts to drive a stake through its heart. Okay. Hearing nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn? Mr. Chairman. Second. Motion by Platt, second by Burnett to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. We'll see you next week.